The brand new Elite Raid feature brings with it some insane potential for quick releases of extremely rare Pokemon, like Hoopa during the last Elite Raid day. But the big question is, what other Pokemon can we expect to see come to the Elite Raids? The most obvious one, Cosmog. Cosmog was released in Pokemon GO on September 1st of 2022 through the Season of Light special research. And the catch? You could only get one. And this is kind of a problem. The reason why is because Cosmog doesn't just have one evolution, it has 3, and a month after its initial release, you were able to evolve your Cosmog over to its first evolution, Cosmoem. And a lot of people had a big problem with this because, well, they wanted to keep their Cosmog. But to complete the special research, you had to evolve it. And to address these Cosmog-y concerns, Pokemon GO officially announced that people will eventually be able to catch more Cosmog, which is important because Cosmoem, Cosmog's evolution, evolves into 2 amazing Pokemon, Solgaleo and Lunala. But if you only got one Cosmog, it means you only have one Cosmoem, which means you have to choose between one of these 2 amazing legendaries. And as a professional Pokedex completer myself, that's BS. Which is why it would make so much sense for Cosmog to be one of the first Elite Raid bosses in Pokemon GO. As the Season of Light continues, we'll eventually be able to evolve our Cosmoem over to Solgaleo and Lunala. But before that happens, I predict Cosmog in the Elite Raids, especially during the Season of Light, just makes sense, so that all of us can at least get a handful of them and evolve to whichever legendary we want. Or keep some Cosmog because it's a cool Pokemon. Now, Cosmog is obvious, but one Pokemon that's a little bit less obvious that I think we'll see in Elite Raids is Regigigas. It used to be an EX Raid boss back in the day when those were still a thing. And although Elite Raids are technically different than EX Raids, I mean, they're kind of the same thing. And Regigigas has historically always been more of an exclusive Pokemon. First released in 2019 in a special research storyline, then later dropped briefly in Tier 5 raids and EX raids. Its shiny was also released during the summer of 2021, which I think is the last time we ever saw it. So for this historically exclusive legendary Pokemon to come out in Elite Raids with its shiny variant available would be amazing. And since we've never had a shiny eligible EX raid boss, Regigigas would make a good first. Plus, it's just a sick Pokemon with an insane max CP of 4,913. Now, unfortunately, it's kind of a pure normal type, so it's useless, but it's cool. But a Pokemon that wouldn't be terribly useless is Zeraora, and it would be epic to have its first ever release in Pokemon GO happen through the Elite Raid feature, which I can definitely see as a feature for future releases of rare and exclusive legendary and mythical Pokemon. This is kind of how like EX raids were back in the day. For example, Mewtwo was released globally for the first time ever through EX raids, and Zeraora has yet to be released in Pokemon GO. Elite raids would be a really fun way to do that, especially if the spawns happening around the Elite raids mimicked the typing of whatever Pokemon was in the Elite Raids. So since Zeraora is an electric type, having like cool, rare electric type Pokemon spawning around the EX Raid when completed, like Ampharos, would be sick. And going back to Zeraora's usefulness in game, it's a pure electric type that maxes out at 3,865 CP. So although it's not as big and beefy as other electrics like Xurkitree, it should still be able to pack a punch. Plus it looks sick, and the shiny is incredible. Do you know what else would be incredible? Kecleon, dude! Kecleon is Pokemon GO's biggest meme. Why? Because it's still not released. It is literally the only Pokemon from the first 3 generations to still not be released in Pokemon GO. It's time, dude! And what better way than through fun, exclusive Elite Raids? It's obviously going to be super exclusive when it drops for the first time, just because of how much anticipation is built up for this thing. So putting it into Elite Raids kind of makes sense. It's also kind of important to know the reason why it hasn't been released yet. It's most likely due to its ability Color Change, which copies the typing of the last move that it was hit by. It's a pretty complex move and system to have to deal with, and could lead to some crazy bugs if implemented wrong. Kind of like how we saw with the release of Zeraora, breaking Pokemon GO in 15 different ways. Kecleon might do the same thing when released, so I'm sure they're working on that. But either way, would love to see it in EX raids or Elite Raids. Another great and unreleased Pokemon that would work well in the Elite Raids is Zygarde. Zygarde was actually teased by Pokemon GO all the way back in December of 2020. They released like a short little video teasing Generation 6, which featured some heavy-hitting legendaries like Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde. We have Xerneas and Yveltal and their shiny forms, but what about Zygarde? Why not that one? Maybe, just maybe, Pokemon GO has been waiting for the perfect way to release this beastie of a legendary. And maybe that's Elite Raids. I definitely think that since we haven't seen this Pokemon yet, it will be released in some sort of exclusive way. And honestly, probably Elite Raids. And when it gets released, Will it be useful? It's a dual ground and dragon type Pokemon, which is a very, very interesting dual typing with a max CP of 3,855, which is unfortunately kind of low for both typings, so probably not super useful. But it does look amazing, and its shiny is one of the best. Zarude is one of Pokemon GO's rarest and most useful Pokemon, and weirdly enough, it's only ever been available once, and for a super limited time. And it never came back. Zarude was released back in October of 2021 to help promote the release of the Pokemon movie Secrets of the Jungle. There was actually an entire event around this movie that featured the Pokemon seen in it, obviously including Zarude, who was obtainable through special research only, which means that the people that were lucky enough to get one only got one. And it's kind of a shame, especially considering how useful Zarude actually is in game. It's a dual grass and dark type Pokemon with a max CP of a whopping 4,334. And it's actually the current #1 non-mega grass type in Pokemon GO. Not to mention, it's a top 10 overall dark type Pokemon, and it's ranked 23rd in the Masters League. It's literally one of the more useful Pokemon in the game, which would make it the perfect candidate for Elite Raids, especially if they release the shiny variant in the Elite Raids. Good night. I would say out of our entire list today, Zarude is probably the #1 most useful pick for a future Elite Raid boss. Another great option would be the mythical Pokemon Keldeo. And since we've already seen one mythical Pokemon in the Elite Raids, we'll most likely see a lot more in the future. They are the most rare entities in Pokemon GO after all. Keldeo is a Generation 5 mythical, which means we probably should be seeing it soon in Pokemon GO anyways. And it's actually one of 3 unreleased Generation 5 Pokemon. The rest of the generation is already released, except for Keldeo, Larvesta, and Volcarona, interestingly enough. All of which we realistically should see sometime this year, I would have to guess. And since Keldeo is a mythical, I'm sure we'll see it released in a much more exclusive way than just tier 5 raid bosses, which gives it a strong case for a Elite Raid candidate. And once we do get it in Pokemon GO, it should be decent. It's going to be a dual water and fighting type Pokemon with a max CP of 4,181, and should honestly pack a decent punch or kick, because it's a horse. That's Generation 5, but the generation before it has 2 Pokemon that are still unreleased. And they happen to be the last unreleased Generation 4 Pokemon, Manaphy and Phione. These 2 are both water-type mythical Pokemon, and I can honestly see them coming out in special research before Elite Raids. Why? Because they're small and cute. And for some reason, it's all these small and cute mythical Pokemon that get special research, and not the other ones. I don't make the rules, okay? Professor Willow does. But I can definitely see these 2 coming to Elite Raids at some point in the future, maybe even as shinies. And imagine, Elite Raids are the new way that shiny exclusive mythicals are released, rather than through special research storylines. Or they release the shiny through the special research storyline so that everyone gets the shiny, and then they re-release them through the Elite Raids so that the lucky few can get more of that shiny. Well, regardless, I can definitely see Manaphy and Phione eventually entering Elite Raids. And in-game, they'll be cute, but not so good. Manaphy will be a pure water-type Pokemon with a max CP of 3,691, and Phione, also a pure water-type, will max out at 2,380. So although they're cool, and they're mythical, and they're cute, they won't be that useful. And finally, in my opinion, the #1 Pokemon to return as an Elite Raid boss would be, drumroll please, Armored Mewtwo. Yes, the infamous and exclusive Armored Mewtwo, I think, will definitely return as an Elite Raid boss. This would probably be the single best non-shiny to bait people into using the new Elite Raid feature. And imagine if they drop shiny Armored Mewtwo through Elite Raids. GG, everyone's outside rating. Armored Mewtwo was released back on July 10th of 2019, and it was available to catch for about 21 days. Then it never returned. Ever. And other than that, there's a couple of factors that made it super rare today. For one, there were no remote raids back in the day, so getting Armored Mewtwo just required a ton of extra effort. And 2, it didn't really compare to normal Mewtwo. It just wasn't as good in game, so people naturally just didn't grind it. Little did we all know it would become one of the most rare, most sought after Pokemon in the entire game, which would make it a great Elite Raid boss. I mean, how else would they bring back something this exclusive? And those were the top 10 best future Elite Raid bosses in Pokemon GO. If you have any others that you think would be great, let me know in the comments and check out the other videos on the screen because they're also elite. I'll see you next video. Take care.